He had completely other plans. He didn't plan to be the man of war. Life placed him on wrong place and wrong time. No matter what he did before, history remembered him by Munich Agreement with Hitler. He was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom just before, and at the beginning of World War II. His name was Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain. British Conservative politician and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, 1937 to 1940. Early life. Arthur Neville Chamberlain was born on March 18, 1869, in Birmingham. He was born to a political family, being the youngest son of Joseph Chamberlain, a Victorian cabinet minister, and the half-brother of Austen, a Chancellor of the Exchequer. His mother was Florence Kenrick and she died when he was a small boy. He was educated at home by his elder sister Beatrice, and at Rugby and Mason College, Birmingham. Neville Chamberlain had little interest in his studies there, and in 1889 his father apprenticed him to a firm of accountants. Within 6 months he became a salaried employee. In 1890 his father sent Neville to the island of Andros in the Bahamas to manage his 20,000-acre sisal plantation. Neville Chamberlain spent 6 years there, but the plantation was a failure, and Joseph Chamberlain lost £50,000. Although the venture failed, comparative social isolation contributed to young Chamberlain's natural reserve, and also gave him confidence in his own decisions. Business career and entry into politics. On his return to England, Neville Chamberlain entered business, purchasing Hoskins and Company, a manufacturer of metal ship berths. Chamberlain served as managing director of Hoskins for 17 years, during which time the company prospered. He also involved himself in civic activities in Birmingham. In 1906, as governor of Birmingham's General Hospital, and along with no more than 15 other dignitaries, Chamberlain became a founding member of the National United Hospitals Committee of the British Medical Association. He was elected a councillor in 1911 in Birmingham, and Lord Mayor in 1915. Then, in 1916, David Lloyd George appointed him Director General of the Department of National Service, but personal bitterness between them led to his resignation within a year. Member of Parliament and Minister. In 1918, he was elected as a Conservative MP, Member of Parliament, for Birmingham. Chamberlain had conceived a healthy dislike of Lloyd George, but supported the coalition government, 1918-22. In 1922, clearly marked out for high office, Chamberlain joined Bonar Law's government as Postmaster General, becoming Minister of Health in 1923, Chancellor of the Exchequer 1923-24, and returning to the health portfolio in Baldwin's second government, 1924-29. During his years at the Ministry of Health, Cabinet agreed to finance a widows', orphans', and old age pensions bill in 1925. He piloted through the Commons the Rating and Valuation Act of 1925, which gave relief from local rates to agriculture and industry, and he initiated the Great Local Government Act of 1929, which abolished the Poor Law Guardians, transferring their powers, and the institutions they administered, including hospitals, to the counties and county boroughs. Meanwhile, he was able to bring about a partnership between private builders and local authorities to build almost 1 million houses for the working classes. His Local Government Act of 1929 reformed the Poor Law, effectively laying the foundations of the welfare state, and reorganized local government finance. In 1931, Ramsay MacDonald made him Chancellor of the Exchequer in his national government. During the economic crisis, he achieved his father's protectionist ambitions by passing the Import Duties Bill in 1932. Chamberlain proposed a 10% tariff on foreign goods, and lower no tariffs on goods from the colonies and the Dominions. Chamberlain reduced the annual interest rate on most of Britain's war debt from 5% to 3.5%. Between 1932 and 1938, Chamberlain had the percentage of the budget devoted to interest on the war debt. Defense spending had been heavily cut in Chamberlain's early budgets. But in 1935, faced with a resurgent Germany under Hitler's leadership, he was convinced of the need for rearmament. Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Chamberlain succeeded Stanley Baldwin as Prime Minister on May 28, 1937. Soon after attaining the premiership, Chamberlain obtained passage of the Factories Act 1937. This act was aimed at bettering working conditions in factories, and placed limits on the working hours of women and children. In 1938, Parliament enacted the Coal Act 1938, which allowed for nationalization of coal deposits. Another major law passed that year was the Holidays with Pay Act 1938. Though the act only recommended that employers give workers a week off with pay, it led to a great expansion of holiday camps and other leisure accommodation for the working classes. The Housing Act 1938 provided subsidies aimed at encouraging slum clearance and maintained rent control. Chamberlain's plans for the reform of local government were shelved because of the outbreak of war in 1939. Likewise, the raising of the school leaving age to 15, scheduled for implementation on September 1, 1939, did not go into effect. Road to Munich. In a futile attempt to sway Fascist Italy away from German influence, he agreed, April 16, 1938, to recognize Italian supremacy in Ethiopia and kept Great Britain out of the Spanish Civil War, 1936–39, in which Italy was deeply involved. A few days later, April 25, he also undertook to abandon British naval bases in Ireland, a move opposed by some as weakening Britain's defence capability. On 3 occasions in September 1938, Chamberlain went to Germany in efforts to prevent the outbreak of a general European war over Hitler's demand that Czechoslovakia cede the Sudetenland to Germany. By the Munich Agreement of September 30, he and Premier Édouard Daladier of France, granted almost all of Hitler's demands and left Czechoslovakia defenseless. He returned to England a popular hero, speaking of peace with honor, and peace for our time. Nonetheless, he immediately ordered the acceleration of the British rearmament program. When Hitler seized the rest of Czechoslovakia, Chamberlain definitely repudiated appeasement, and he soon published Anglo-French guarantees of armed support for Poland, Romania, and Greece in the event of similar attacks. Refusal of alliance with Soviet Union. Because he distrusted Joseph Stalin ideologically, he was reluctant to seek a military anti-fascist alliance with the Soviet Union. The talks with Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov dragged on over several months and eventually foundered on August 14, 1939, when Poland and Romania refused to allow Soviet troops to be stationed on their territories. According to the project, all three powers, Great Britain, France and Soviet Union, would give each other, and any state bordering Germany, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Turkey, Greece and Belgium, guarantee of military help in case of German aggression. They reached a preliminary agreement, but Britain and France only sent minor military officials to Moscow, who weren't even authorized to make any decisions without their government's approval. After failure of these talks, the Soviet Union and Germany signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, committing the countries to non-aggression toward each other. On August 23, 1939, Chamberlain at Henderson delivered a letter to Hitler telling him that Britain was fully prepared to comply with its obligations to Poland. Hitler instructed his generals to prepare for an invasion of Poland. Resignation. The invasion of Poland forced Chamberlain's hand, and he declared war on 3 September, 1939. He soon came under attack from all political sides after the disastrous first months of war, when Germany looked set for a rapid victory. Unable to form a national government himself, he resigned on May 10, 1940 after the failure of the British efforts to liberate Norway and on day of the German invasion of the Holland and Belgium. In Churchill's coalition government he served loyally as Lord President of the Council until September 30, 1940, when ill health forced him to resign that office and the Conservative Party leadership. Personal life. At 40, Chamberlain was expecting to remain a bachelor, but in 1910 he fell in love with Anne Cole, a recent connection by marriage, and married her the following year. They met through his Aunt Lillian, the Canadian-born widow of Joseph Chamberlain's brother Herbert, who in 1907 had married Anne Cole's uncle Alfred Clayton Cole, a director of the Bank of England. She encouraged and supported his entry into local politics and was to be his constant companion, helper, and trusted colleague, fully sharing his interests in housing and other political and social activities after his election as an MP. The couple had a son, Francis Neville, and a daughter, Dorothy Ethel. Chamberlain died of bowel cancer on November 9, 1940 at the age of 71. A funeral service took place at Westminster Abbey. Due to wartime security concerns, the date and time were not widely publicized. After cremation, his ashes were interred in the abbey next to those of Bonar-Law. On his deathbed he gathered the strength to whisper, "Approaching dissolution brings relief." Legacy and reputation. A few days before his death, Neville Chamberlain wrote, "So far as my personal reputation is concerned, I am not in the least disturbed about it. The letters which I am still receiving in such vast quantities, so unanimously dwell on the same point, namely, without Munich the war would have been lost and the empire destroyed in 1938, I do not feel the opposite view has a chance of survival. Even if nothing further were to be published, giving the true inside story of the past 2 years, I should not fear the historian's verdict." Historian David Dutton observes that Chamberlain's reputation, for good or ill, will probably always be closely tied to evaluation of his policy toward Germany. Whatever else may be said of Chamberlain's public life, his reputation will in the last resort depend upon assessments of this moment, Munich, and this policy, appeasement. This was the case when he left office in 1940 and it remains so 60 years later. To expect otherwise is rather like hoping that Pontius Pilate will one day be judged as a successful provincial administrator of the Roman Empire.